Welcome back to another tutorial for VoxelVision 4.0, and the new update just released, and we already got so many new amazing people and so much lovely support. It just amazes me and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for all of this. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like the video, and let's jump right into it. So we are here once again in Blender 5.0, and in this tutorial we are actually going to take a look at all the asset generators that VoxelVision provides. So rock generators, tree generators, fence generators, wall generators, and all those amazing stuffs. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is to check if VoxelVision is actually installed. If you need help or if you need a guide, we already published a tutorial on this YouTube channel, so feel free to check it out. The next thing that we can do is to drag and drop this workspace or this window a bit up so we can actually see a bit better, and we're going to open up the asset browser. And the asset browser is basically where all those asset generators live or sit in. So you can see all those yellowish asset generators are actually from VoxelVision. And then you got like others like assets that either way you purchase yourself or Blender provides from the default. So to only see VoxelVision's generators, you can go up to this little drop down and select VoxelVision. If it happens that you don't see those asset generators, because either way you haven't linked the assets or you set up the asset library in a previous update, maybe like if you purchase VoxelVision 3.0, you can go to Edit, Preferences, and then you can actually go to Add-ons again, VoxelVision, and then you go to Database and you just click on Refresh Asset Library Link, and this will basically reset the link for you. Okay, once this is done, we can actually move this a bit down so you actually see what's going on the screen. And I would actually go ahead and go one by one to basically explain what each modifier does. As you can see, we have multiple asset generators and there are also like tree presets. I already made a tutorial on the tree generators, so this is the only thing that I won't talk about in this tutorial. If you want to check out the tree generators, I will link the tutorial for the tree generators as well, so you can check it out. Alright, so let's use the curve to block tool first. I'm gonna remove all the assets in the scene with Ctrl and right click, and actually I'm gonna enable the little drop down so you can see which keys and shortcuts I'm pressing. I'm gonna drag and drop the curved blocks into the scene. And what you can see is some sort of curve. As you can see here, it is converted to blocks. Well, pretty easy, isn't it? So to see more of the settings that the modifier has, you can go to this little drop down in the Properties tab. You can go to the Modifiers, and then you basically see the VoxelVision generator and all the settings of the curved block modifier. Let's concentrate on the 3D viewport for now. You can go to Edit mode, and then you will see you got some handles and points over here. And if you drag and drop those points, if you click and select one and press E, you can actually move all of those points around. This is pretty handy. And well, maybe you dislike, you could select this one and press E, and you could basically extrude, rotate, and scale it. Well, you scale the handle. If you want to make it thicker, you can scale with Alt S, and then it basically increases the thickness. And if you have like some sort of texture on it, you can actually tilt it with Ctrl T, and then it will tilt the texture, but you can't really see it in this mode, obviously. So if I hide this one, you also cannot really see it, but if I go into this mode, you can see we actually tilting the geometry. So if you have textures on it, you can actually rotate it pretty well. Okay, let's bring this back on. Let's go into shading view. You can also paint or directly draw lines in the 3D viewport. So let me show you how you can do this. I select all of those lines and delete them. And then you can go to this toolbar. If you don't see the toolbar, you can open and close it by pressing T on your keyboard. Then you can go to draw, and this is basically the draw tool. So you can just draw with your mouse and it basically creates the curve. Pretty cool. You can also, if I can demonstrate it for you, if I have like a plane, and this plane has a couple of subdivisions, and I go to proportional editing at the top, you can actually make some sort of cool landscape. And yeah, you can basically then go into this, delete everything again. You can go to this top section where it says cursor and surface. If you choose surface, you can actually draw directly onto this surface and your blocks will spawn there. Then you can move it up basically with G and then apply the location, and then it actually snaps right into place, which is pretty handy. And yeah, so this is pretty much everything that you can do inside the 3 viewport. And then you got some settings. So at the moment, if you come to this modifier section, you can have preview. Preview is basically, well, radius, resolution. Resolution is not really necessary. It's only for the radius. So 16 is probably right enough. Radius to make it thicker. And if you disable preview, you can basically see it gets thicker. You got other settings as well. So you got blending mode, which is actually how you want to blend it with different gradients or vertex colors. So for example, if your model has vertex colors or attributes, you can then choose how much the color should blend with it. So by default it's black. So if I go to 0, your model gets black. If you go to 1, it's fully the custom coloring at the bottom. And this is pretty much the same for the rock. So in this case, it's just if you want to adjust anything in particular. Otherwise, I would basically recommend using textures or color attributes. So something like this. And then you can also come at any point to this part and choose the simple rock, for example. And you got some nice looking rocky textures. You can obviously also remove stairs and slabs. And then you're pretty much good to go, alright? So let's go for this. You can choose also some noise. So this is the curved blocks modifier. I will hide this modifier for now, but we will revisit it later. So the next one in our list is the curved fence. And it does exactly what the curved blocks modifier does, but it draws fences. So basically you can go into edit mode by pressing tab or control tab and choosing edit and object mode. You can remove all of those vertices again, choose draw, and then basically draw anything you want, and it basically will automatically draw your fences in the 3D scene. And the same goes for the plane. If you, for example, want to draw it onto the terrain, you can go to surface and then draw directly on the surface. Here you will notice that, well, the curve is on top of it, but the fences are clipping through the mesh at some places. So to fix this, you could press G and move it along the Z axis, and then press location, apply, and then it will basically fix it for most cases, as you can see right here. If this would also be a terrain that you generate with VoxelVision, you would then have a perfectly painted fence. This is pretty much everything you can do with the fence mode. You can change the color. So if I change to green, you can basically get some warp fences. If you go to orange, red, you get some different colors. You can also change if it should be one color or if you want to change it with different colors. Something like this. Pretty cool. The next one is the curved wall modifier, and this is actually exactly the same. So just with walls, you can remove all the vertices and you can draw on the surface. Then you can move it up and it's sitting right on your terrain. Perfect. The same color methods with noise, without noise, pretty much the same. So nothing crazy here as well. I remove this as well, and then I will hide the plane for now. The next thing in our list is the glass fog generator. You get this in two different variants, glass fog rectangle and glass fog freeform. They're essentially the same, but one of them has like this outline where you can basically draw any shape, and then you can basically bend it to your likings. So in case you want to have something crazy, you could do select this one and this one, you can go to subdivide and you get a new vertex, and then you can do something crazy like this. And the glass fog generator is basically a glass fog generator, so those cool looking fog floors that you see all the time. We get a couple of settings here. If you go to the modifiers, we have the glass type, so you can change which glass you want to use. And I am holding Control and wheel and scrolling to basically loop through and cycle through those floors. You can change the height. For example, if you end up with a height where all the lamps or end rods are at the top, you can switch the top layer, so it switches basically. And then you can change the light source. You can change which one, so torches, lanterns, end rods. You can change what the probability is, a lot or none, something in between. If you have something in between, you can change the probability seed. And then you can also add some placeholders, for example pink wool in this case, if you want to paste it in your terrain and you want to actually have like, well, air in between all those layers. And that's pretty much what this modifier does. It's pretty cool. Then apply the transforms and export it as usual. The glass fog generator is the same one for the rectangle, as you can see, just in a rectangular shape. So I'm not gonna explain this once more. The next one in our list is the image to flower generator, which is also pretty self-explanatory. So you get an image, you can import one or choose any one of your likings. So in this case, I will import one of my textures, for example, this beach one here. And you can see it will try to fill out all those blanks with the texture. In this case, I can actually scale this up a bit and move it all the way. And then apply the transforms. And you can see we kinda get the illusion or the flower bed that the image represented. You can change if alpha channel should be deleted and to which threshold, of course. And that's pretty much it for the image to flower generator already. So yeah, we won't gonna spend a lot of time on it. I'm gonna delete it as well. Then we got a couple of exciting ones like Ambient Occlusion, Linear Gradient, Preview Color, and so on. And we're gonna do those at the end. So I'm gonna jump right into the simple Meteor, which is basically a simple rock generator, but with a preset as a simple Meteor. So as you can see, if I go into solid view, you can see it has like this Meteor shape, and then you basically apply the textures and you get something like this. With the rock generator, you have also a couple of settings, and I'm going to explain all of those on the simple rock generator, which looks like this. So how are I going to use the simple rock generator? It's pretty straightforward. You got the rock generator modifier and the VoxelVision modifier. So you get all the settings of the VoxelVision generator, which converts it into blocks, plus a generator for the rock. So if you drag in the preset, you can actually go right down to the custom block selection and choose the simple rock template and then activate it. And then you get like a cool looking rock already. You can then also disable stairs and slabs, and you have this gorgeous looking rocks. If you go into edit mode, you can actually, well, select some of those parts and move them around, scale them, or delete them entirely. So this is what I'm going to do at this stage. And then you're left with this beautiful rock. If you then have a look at the rock generator modifier, you can actually see all those blending modes again, and I'm explaining those, or all of those will make sense once we get to the coloring and gradient options. So we jump right into the shape. You can of course preview it once more, so you can set the subdivision level. Don't go too crazy with it. You can say how smooth it is or how much it should go to your original form. You can say how much displacement it should have. You can say how much the strength is. You can say which axis it should be scaled the most. And then you can set this seed, obviously. Then you can obviously set the grass coverage, so how much should be grass. You can set the grass color, you can set the gradient height, which is basically from top to bottom the white or the black or darker colors for the shadows. If you undo the preview, you can actually see how it performs in here. If I change the gradient height, you can see the dark will push up. If you go down, the lighter colors will push up. That's pretty neat. A couple of cool things actually. You can then go into the 3D viewport and then just duplicate all those rocks. Then you can go in, maybe select it, scale it, select it, scale it, maybe on the Z, make it like a bit like this. Then you can also go completely crazy, select the top one, E extrude, E once more, and then go down again, and you get like this awesome looking bridge. And for example, now you can see, does not look very good, so you can actually set the gradient a bit higher. And then you can basically go back into the displacement maybe a bit more, so it gets a bit more distorted, you get some glyphs, and then you can go into the normal settings of VoxelVision and turn on the variation of the noise a tiny bit more, so you get some sort of variance in the gradient, and you get like this awesome looking glyph here, which is just amazing. Yeah, so I'm gonna just make all of those a bit prettier, just like this, maybe gradient color a bit higher, making the strength a bit higher. And then we go into this one, also a bit higher, a bit more strength, and we're good to go. So now I'm centering all of those with Alt G, and then I'm putting all of those rocks into their own collection. So let's call those rocks, and then I am moving all of those into this collection. And this will be important later on, as you will see. So this is basically how the rock generator works. Pretty neat, huh? So let's hide them for now. The next thing that we're gonna do is to check out the simple spikes. Simple spikes is another preset of the rock generator, so you can actually see how versatile it is. In this case, a blue mix with some cones will produce those little spikes. We actually reached the end of all those basic generators, and then I will jump into our simple terrain, actually, because this is like the most convenient one to explain all the other modifiers that we got. Once you drag in the terrain generator, you will see a terrain preset. And disclaimer, I will make a dedicated terrain tutorial in the next week, which will explain how you can make awesome terrain with a few different tools like height maps, displacements, making it your own, using presets, and so on and so on. So this will just have a look at those terrains over here. Obviously, you can go into edit mode and just trying to basically select an edge, press E, and it will then extrude outwards, and the terrain will follow it. But this is not really the point of this showcase. So let's go into the settings over here. Once more, you get a preview, so you can actually see what's going on. You can see how much subdivision the terrain has. So in this case, 3 works quite well. How smooth the terrain is. How intense the displacement is. The displacement strength, scale, scaling factor, and displacement seed. And then you also have like grass coverage once more, gradient color, and new addition is the snow coverage. So you can actually say where the snow begins and where it basically ends. If I undo the preview, you can see how this works. And well, now you can also see we have some unwanted blocks over here. Copper does not really fit. So you can go into the custom block selection once more down here. And I'm just speeding through the entire process a little bit because I'm, well, assuming that you already knew the VoxelVision generator from the second tutorial. So, well, this is why, basically. If you are unaware how this all works, I highly recommend checking out the second tutorial where I talk about the entire VoxelVision geometry node modifier and all those settings in here. So once you come to the custom block selection, you can go and choose the simple terrain template, and activating it will basically remove all those unwanted blocks and give you this awesome looking terrain out of the box. So this looks awesome, but we can do way more. And this is where all the other modifiers basically come into place. And this is also where it can get really tricky. The first thing that we want to check out is different gradients. If you check, or if you drag and drop the radial gradient onto the terrain, the first thing that you will notice, nothing happens. The other thing that you notice is that it is a new modifier and it is after the VoxelVision generator. And this is not going to work because the blocks are generated at this stage. So you want to move this actually upwards in between the terrain and the radial gradient. And this is where now the mixing comes into place. If you look at this now and preview it, you can see before and after looks like this. So it has an influence, but we can make it better. So this is only the radial gradient and this is the terrain generator from before. You can choose then different mix modes, but this is how it works. And in order to get the radial gradient to work, you can actually bring in an empty object. So in this case, a sphere, to make it more visible. You can scale the sphere up so you actually see the sphere. It looks like this. And if you go back and select the empty with the little eyedropper, this will be your hook basically, or the center of the gradient. So if you scale the empty now, or if you move the empty, you can see your radial gradient goes with you. And you can now basically do a lot of stuff with it. So if you put it over here, for example, and go back into the settings, you can see blending, blending, blending. If you, for example, go to 1 and then scroll through all those blending modes, you can see what happens. You get a lot of different settings. For example, this looks really cool. And then you can change colors, of course. You can change colors of the gradient, for example, like this. Maybe go back to mix, then it's a bit easier to see. And then maybe something like this. You can also change the softness. So either way, hard, very hard edges, or very soft. So if we choose something like this and go back to the VoxelVision, you can actually see we kind of move our moss blocks around now. So which is really nice. So the same thing goes for the linear gradient. If you drag and drop this one onto it, you will see nothing really happens. And this is why we are drag and dropping it in between. You can check on the preview again and you will see, well, somehow this doesn't work. And you can already see again those little hook objects for start and end. So we're gonna add another empty here, scale it up, and duplicating it over here. And now you can basically say, okay, this linear gradient should go from here to here. And now you have like this beautiful gradient, which this is the end point, and this is the start point, just like this. Let me select the hook here really quick. Okay, just like this. And it works from all angles. So if you go downwards, it will go downwards. If you go upwards, it will go upwards, in any direction in 3D space. And now it's really cool. For example, if we now use like a yellow color over here, and the other one should be maybe some really dark tones, we can then play with the mixing mode and go something like this. And now if we turn off the preview, well, the colors will not really match because we disabled those blocks. If we turn this one on, you can actually see how it performs. So you can go into some blue colors, some green colors, some pink colors, and you will basically see how this influences your terrain. So you can go and put the hook over here and you will see it still works. And this is basically the entire power or look of it. And maybe you're saying, well, that's cool, but somehow I want the terrain generator to pop a bit more. So, well, you can just drag it and move it at the bottom. And then once more, play around with the blending. So maybe a tiny bit less. So it shines through just a little bit. And you get something like this, which is really, really nice. And those are basically those gradients. Then we also have ambient occlusion. And to show you this, we can actually hide this for a second and go to something like the monkey. So if we scale up this monkey really quick and give it some roundness, you can then go and drag and drop the ambient occlusion onto it. So the ambient occlusion basically does nothing. Why is that? Because we cannot preview the color. To do that, you click on preview, but still nothing happens. Weird. You can actually drag and drop the preview color material onto it, and then you will see how it will look in preview and without preview. So you get some sliders, the blending modes again, and you get min and max. So if I crank up the maximum, you can see the cavities, or basically all of those shadows are now highlighted red. So if I do those black and do the other ones white, you can actually see ambient occlusion popping off. So this is really cool. You can also play around with all those colors, obviously. And yeah, this is basically a new way of masking that you can use. And if you want to turn those into blocks, you can then go into modifiers or the assets and drag and drop the VoxelVision geometry node modifier onto it as well. And we see it directly uses all those colors. You can then also go into utilities, no transparent blocks, maybe no bricks, and well, maybe no creative blocks as well. And you can see how the mask is actually influencing our Suzanne head over here. Just like this. And then obviously you can go in and create more gradients and more maskings to really make this pop. For example, if we go back into here, make the shadows maybe some gray, green, you can really see how this impacts your model, which is really, really cool. Alright, so let's get rid of this Suzanne head and jump right back into our simple terrain, because I want to show you some really, really cool and exciting tips. So, we actually have some other generators that we haven't looked at yet, and I saved the best ones for last. So, I will explain the overlay modifier now, and then we come to the scatter objects and the spawn grass asset generator. Overlays, drag it, drop it, and nothing happens. Damn it. What can we do? The overlays is basically the new method of showing some data about your model. So the first option is show world direction. So basically see in which direction the model will be facing if you import it with Lightmatica, for example. Then you can also show the dimensions of your model. So in this case, it's 270 blocks in this direction, 288 in this direction, and on the Z-axis, it's 85. You can also display the total block amount, in which case this is now 95,000 blocks. And you can change the text size, obviously, but it's not really important. And then you can also change the layer that you want to display. So this is show layer 1, and you can click through all those layers and see basically how it builds up, which is really cool if you want to do animations, or if you just want to build it hand by hand. And if you want to build it hand by hand, you can also do show single layer, and you only see like the current layer that you add, which is also pretty handy. And if you then go to show total block amount, you can see how many blocks are within this row. Like, well, this is really amazing, right? Exactly, and this is basically what the overlay does. And it should always be like at the end of the modifier chain, so it actually makes sense. And if you look at this, it actually looks kind of cool. So yeah, if you need this, the option is definitely here. And if not, it is also not hurting. So let's remove this really quick. And now we can get to the most exciting part, the scatter object. And let's drag and drop it onto it. And well, nothing happens. This really sucks, right? And this is where our rock pack comes into place. So if I hide this for a second, you can see we had all those different rocks over here. And we can actually use them now with the scatter object mode. So let's imagine you make a tree pack. You made a rock pack. This is where you can use them. If you go to the modifier tab, you can see we can use either objects, single objects, or a collection. So for now, let's use an object. I select the simple rock, and you can see, whoa, it just spawns them everywhere. By default, it is set to avoid intersections, but you can also use like manual mode, where it then use the minimum object distance in between. And if you go to density and crank it up to 1, it will then basically spawn them just everywhere. But if you use avoid intersections, it will basically use a bit of a sparse mode over here. Well, this is cool and all, but somehow this looks a bit wrong, to be fair. So we can actually change this. We can say if we want to have some offset in the z-axis, so we can move them down. And if we want to have like a random offset factor, if we do like 5, you can see, well, maybe 15, you can see some of them are getting moved more to the bottom and some probably won't. So something like this looks really cool, and we get some variation. You can then also go and play with the seed of those random heights, and you can also play with the seed of the density. So if I do like 50% and I play with the seed, you can see how they move around, and you can basically play around with it until you're happy. If you look from the top, you can see all of those rocks are basically directed in the same direction, and you can change this with the random rotation mode. So now they are rotated by 90 degrees in a random pattern, which you can also change with the seed mode, as you can see. And then you can see this little spawning mask section. What could it be? Well, if you have a look at where those rocks spawn, you can actually specify where those objects should spawn and where not. How can you do it? Well, if you look at the N panel over here, you will see the modifier stack section, where you have all those little sections. And you can actually hide specific ones and enable specific ones. And in case a mask is available for a modifier, you will see it at this little section. So you actually can click on it, and now you disabled it. Well, if you enable it, and then you can basically go into the mask editor, which looks quite the same as the custom block selection, but now it specifies where those rocks should spawn, or where they shouldn't. So let's say they should only spawn on moss blocks. We can go into this section and type in moss block. Let's do it like this. And now you can see they are all gone from this side, and they can only spawn on the moss blocks. And maybe you say, well, on the... Oh, now it's hard. I don't really know which coral type it is. So we can now basically try. This looked right, maybe? I'm not sure. Okay, the bubble column it was. So now you can see they also spawn in here. Let's maybe also try all the other corals that we have. Okay, we had quite a few types, and you can see they all spawn in those sections, but not on the snow, all on the mossy cobblestone, which is quite insane, and you can go crazy with it. So maybe want to have a bit of a variation in the objects, and this is where we can come to the collection type. If we choose collection, and now we can go to rocks, and then it will basically choose a random one from the selection. So let's go into manual mode for this one and basically say, well, 25, and now you can see we get a lot of variation just by this. On and off. You can play with the seed and offset, you can play with the density if you do like 0.75, and then maybe go with the seed. You can actually play around with it, and this doesn't look bad, right? It's quite fun actually. It obviously depends on your models. I mean, this gateway does not really make sense in this scenario, but you get the point, I hope. So let's do maybe another try. I mean, this doesn't look too bad, right? Let's use this. And this is how you can scatter objects. So if I were and use trees, we can actually demonstrate this right now. I will use like the birch tree. And once more, a full tutorial about the trees is already live. So please check it out in case you want to learn more about the entire tree generator that you can see on this side over here. So in this case, I just move it to the center with Alt G, just like this. And we will hide it from this selection. We will select the terrain once more. And then we can actually just drag and drop another scatter object mode onto it. And we can now use our birch tree. And you will see, voila, all the birch trees are appearing. So now also set the density maybe 2.5. Set the random rotation so they don't look the same at every point. And then we can also say birch trees should only spawn on moss. So let's go into scatter objects 001, mask editor, type in moss, choose moss block, and they now only spawn on moss blocks. And if you actually go in here and change the seed, you will see that they actually recognize the moss of your previous scattered object. Maybe you say, well, that's not really cool. I don't want that trees are on my rocks. So you can basically go in here and swap the order. And now trees will only spawn at those sections. But, well, it can be that like the rock will then spawn inside your tree, and you can't really avoid that. But at least you could influence it in a certain manner. So let's change it back, because I actually quite prefer it if they can spawn on those rocks. So let's make it a bit denser, so we get maybe quite a few more. Changing the seed will likely help. And this doesn't look too bad, right? But we can make it even better. So if you're happy with like all the scattering, what would it be without grass, right? So now you can go in and click the spawn grass on top of it, and it will spawn grass. Well, but also like on every block. So let's have a look at the modifier once more. And it says we have spawn density. If we disable it, we just get grass everywhere, which is not really cool. We can also definitely set the spawn density. So in this case, it's like a noisy pattern with some settings, scale, seed, and so on. And then you also have the spawning mass. If we can go into spawn grass, you can then select the moss block. And now, well, it only spawns grass on moss blocks and not all the stone variants. But maybe we also want to have it on the moss cobblestone. So let's select it for the purpose of this video. And you will see, well, it also spawns on this section over here, which is just really, really awesome. This is basically what the power of all those S generators can produce if you combine it in this manner. So we can actually go in and now click on export schematic. So we are now inside of Minecraft, and let's jump into Axiom. Let's select and import our schematic. And if we now go in and paste our schematic, it should, as you can see, look exactly as our in or exported version. So let's put this into the ground, at least a tiny bit. Press Ctrl V. Oh, whoopsie. Let's remove this real quick, and don't paste the error, and press Ctrl V, and we are good to go. So you can actually see we get all the grass on our mossy cobblestone. We get our grass only on the moss. We get our trees spawning in. Really, really nice. We get our different types of rocks spawning in. And I mean, if you look from here, for example, what can you say? This looks actually really, really awesome, right? So let's jump in, grab some shaders. It looks absolutely gorgeous. And don't forget, I will create an entire video just about creating terrains with different methods. For example, displacements, as I just said, creating your own, and you can shape and move vertices all on your own inside of Blender and make what you actually want to make, and without any big hurdles. And once more, you can also use modded blocks. You can use all kind of different scattered objects without limitations. Well, your only limitation is your PC hardware, because at some point it will probably explode. But still, like, making this mountain and then pasting it into already existing terrain is already pretty insane. So what do you think? Please write your ideas, feedback, and anything else in the comments, or join our Discord server for more information, for more inspiration. And I really appreciate all the love and support from all of you guys. And I would say see you in the next one. And the next one is about terrain generation. And I'm very excited to see you in the next one. Peace out.